there's still change management processes at these Fortune 500 types that have to go through a human approval. The same way that you hire a human and you're going to require them to get sign off. These things also require sign off within their broader environment. So the human interface was kind of like another bet we made, and that we could invest in relative to the models getting proper VC funded and they'd be trained on someone else's dollar. We don't sell to tech companies, and I think folks that aren't in tech or that are in tech don't typically realize this, but there is a large portion of the US and the global economy that needs this technical talent but cannot get it, right? So I think folks that I went to college with, a lot of them work at the John Deeres, the Targets, anywhere across Ohio, Indiana, Minnesota, and their ability to hire and retain technical talent is very hard. So for us to be able to support them is kind of our mission.
So today we have Brendon Geils from Athena Intelligence. Coincidentally spell out AI, maybe on purpose. And they build an enterprise AI analyst for Fortune 500 companies. So Brendon previously deployed data science tools for AI platforms for like Palantir and Scale AI. And you worked in the Middle East, in Washington, D.C., focused on defense, intelligence, and healthcare. And before software, you built instrumentation systems for SpaceX at the Florida launch facility. And you received a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Iowa State University. So very impressive backgrounds. And welcome to the webinar.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. Do you want to dive right into the questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. So fun fact, first things first.
Fun fact. So from the days when I was in school in Iowa, my first machine learning project was on a swine farm. It was detecting pigs that were being laid on by their mothers. So they have these farrowing cages, basically like a litter of pigs, and a lot of pigs perish because their mother lies on them. So you can actually detect a pig that's potentially in harm by the tone of their scream. That was the first ML project that I supported.
That is such a specific and niche problem.
Yeah, it's that problem set doesn't make it to the coast yet. It's very Midwest. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so let's dive right into the meat of it. So LangGraph. I've recently seen that you guys were featured in one of the case studies by the LangChain people. And here in Ottawa, we're pretty close to LangChain. They send us swags like once in a while. So we're pretty tight. So
I'm waiting for an actual chain. I want my LangChain chain. When is that coming?
Make chains. Like, so everybody can be like Zuck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so and now the world knows that Athena Intelligence, you guys have basically LangGraph agents that power your analyst. So I know you don't want to give out too much of the secrets, but like on a high level, how does that work?
Yeah. A high level, it's LangGraph. Or maybe just kind of roll back a few years when we started. There was not too many platforms or tooling around the space. LangChain was kind of one of the first ones that early on we felt was showing some promise. I think they get a bad rap online for some reason with the developer community, but we've had an absolutely stellar experience. And the reason we went with them early on was the kind of the promise was the ability to use multiple models. So our enterprise buyer likes and appreciates and deploys in environments where they have internal LLMs that they've built. They want to use an LLM that they've gotten approved within their organization. Let's imagine, Anthropic does a deal with Walmart, a Fortune 1 company, and they're like, hey, you have to use the Anthropic API key that we have. Being able for us to adhere to that is kind of like a first class requirement. So early days, that was the reason we went with LangChain. Nowadays, the value is kind of additionally accrued from the platform they built in Langsmith, we're huge fans of. And then more recently, LangGraph, which all of our agents are powered by LangGraph as like the actual orchestration.
Makes perfect sense. I remember in 2023, I was playing around with agents and I lost all faith in them because you can only give them like 3 tools at a time, and then they're like spaz out. But like things have changed so much, and you guys have been around for over a year, I'm assuming, right? So
Yeah,
you've
2.5.
yeah, so you've seen the progressions, right? So like, do you remember anything that's kind of like a key moment, or like a discovery, or like an innovation from one of these labs that made it so that agents can now like be more reliable, or like more, of a reality in like enterprise settings?
Yeah. So early on, our belief was, don't try to make the agent work if it's not going to work. Like, you can always continue to build. I think uh, early days, our goal was to provide as much context to the agent. In context, sounds easy from a programming perspective, but it's still the hardest problem we face, which is getting access to the right data sources and then representing that data source in a way that the agent can reliably and intelligently make use of that data. Nowadays, it's a bit more straightforward how multimodal injection works with these types of systems. But early days, this is still a very, very hard problem set. From a actual agent side of the house, we found probably by GPT-4 use cases that were actually valuable in the market. But we always say, like, we skate to where the puck is going. Very much on the agent side, the puck is finally here. So the kind of the deployment model, as well as the value accrued in the current deployments, are actually quite nice relative to even a year ago, where it was early days, and we chose to kind of continue to build the data sources rather than more complex architectures, and let the models get better while also simplifying the architectures.
So that sounded like you guys made a bet early on that the models are going to get better, the technology is going to get there, but we'll just have to be ready for now when that time comes. Is that right?
Yeah, we spend most of our time in the data layer as well as the interface. You can have the smartest agent in the world. If you don't have an interface for that agent to interact with a human, it's not useful. Even if the thing is, let's call it super intelligence, there's still change management processes at these Fortune 500 types that have to go through a human approval. The same way that you hire a human and you're going to require them to get sign off, these things also require sign off within their broader environment. So the human interface was kind of like another bet we made, and that we could invest in relative to the models getting proper VC funded, and they'd be trained on someone else's dollar.
Makes sense. Yeah, and I distinctly remember that in every like LangGraph documentation, or like marketing materials, they have like human in the loop, like sections or segments that you can always like easily like insert into like the flow. And I think they just came out with like subgraphs now. I don't know if you guys use subgraphs at all.
Of course, yeah. No, we helped like influence some of those early decisions, and we love the team over there. They're really great.
Awesome. So this is a good segue because we're talking about the government, talking about like Fortune 500. So other than technical challenges, it's got to be like organizational ones, and the ones that are kind of like people related. So if you had to choose like top 3 challenges when you're like deploying these solutions, what would those things be?
Security and compliance is always number one. Like, I think you can never have you're never done. It's always influencing and providing additional trust within an org. So we go so far as deploy on private clouds, AWS, GCP, Azure. We're deployed all the way into government networks today. It's kind of like a hard requirement for us, and we did that early days. But it obviously has second and third order effects on what types of APIs we can use, what type of services we can deploy, because we're within these environments. There's typically not access to the public APIs that everyone has.
That definitely makes sense. So in Ottawa, everything's Azure. Azure has dominated the city for like a while, and we just start to see like Google Cloud people start to come in and kind of like start things here and there, and our meetup actually benefit from some of that, because they're like, hey, you guys are like the only like serious AI people in town. Okay, well, we'll just sprinkle things here and there for you. So that's great, and
Yeah.
definitely makes sense. So data residency also, right? Like, because I'm assuming you guys probably deploy your agents on, like you said, private cloud instead of like the regular LangGraph cloud stuff. So is there anything else that comes to mind when it comes to like work with Fortune 500 and like making sure that they're happy with and like feel safe with like what you're providing?
Yeah, the other one that we think a lot about right now is the permissioning model. So, like roll back 2 years ago, the permissioning model was a human user logs into a platform, provides and connects and uploads some data source, and then whatever that user's permissions are effectively are inherited from the LLM or the agent. The access to some SQL database, it'd be your user creds or the creds that you create for it. Nowadays, we're procuring emails and ephemeral accounts that are agent specific. So the same way that you hire someone, you give them an email address and you give them access to certain systems. We find that we don't want to reinvent the wheel. It's a solved problem, but it's still like it's a hard transition from what we built maybe 2 years ago. But that's kind of like some of the exciting stuff we're seeing around treating the agent like a true agent and not just an extension of the user.
Great. So another segue to the great part. So a lot of Gen AI companies sell to like, more like the cutting edge startups and people who are more comfortable trying, tools that perhaps work some of the times, but not always. But I know, for public sector and enterprises, it's a completely different story. So how different is it when you walk into a demo with these people and you're like, okay, I guess you have like a list of things you care about. So how do these demos usually go? Like, how do you convince or like approach these organizations of like, hey, like this is like really like cutting edge, but I think it's going to be a great fit for you guys, and I think you guys can really benefit from this.
We submit a resume. It's funny, most questions I answer, it's just exactly how an analyst gets hired. Like in some ways, we're basically a recruiting agency. We basically are placing a recruit that recruits an analyst that we built. So an example is, let's say McKesson is going out and hiring a research analyst. They're going to put a job posting on the internet and say, hey, we need a remote hire in Ottawa 2 days a week. They're going to be doing this sort of work. We basically look around the internet for roles that we feel the analyst can solve today. We submit an Athena resume. She has her own resume. And then we get, shopped around into the org and they're like, I can't tell if this is like real or not. We'll jump on the phone. And then typically in that first demo, we bring the agent. She joins the call. I can have her join the call actually with us right now if you're interested. And it participates.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I wanna hear this agent.
I'll bring her on. And so in many ways, I think a lot of people talk about like agents as, this kind of this piece of software. We really believe it is like supposed to act like a true remote hire. So our end of year goal, which is lofty, but we're on track, is every single task, a Fortune 500 new hire in the analyst role should be done by end of year. The capability should be there. And then we want to use 2025 for our distribution. But that's everything that a remote hire can do. So if it's, general Microsoft Office suite, everything from, base technical stuff around Python and SQL, that kind of like entry level layer of a new hire. Those are the types of workflows that we support today.
Okay, so she's here.
Yeah. So I have her in, there's a listen and participate, kind of like, if you have a new analyst, the first week on the job, you're, hey, attend all the meetings, but like zip it. And then I can switch her over to participate mode. And then in participate, she has both voice as well as chat. The voice is a little eerie. I just turned the chat on. So you can say like, hey, Athena, let's put together a report. Can you search the internet? Can you pull down this information? And then she'll start responding and kind of participating. We also use this as like a method to collect workflows. So if you think of like a new analyst that's being hired, a lot of times you're training them up, especially if they're a remote hire, not by prompting them in text over Slack. You're doing so by doing a screen share over a Zoom meeting or Microsoft Team meetings. So those are the sorts of things that, however, an analyst is currently being trained up, we want to be the exact same equivalent.
That's really interesting. So I have a somewhat of a more philosophical question for you. So it seems like even the approach of like you guys sending out a resume for like these job postings, to like having the agent like join the call and like having an onboard like ramping up period for them. Is the reason for humanizing this entity is because of technical reasons, or is it because like it makes an easier narrative for your customers to understand where the technology is coming from and how it could benefit the organization?
I think all the above, but like the other way like we think about it is it's harder for us to teach a human some new paradigm. Hey, there's this thing called an AI agent. This is how you work with it. You have to log in here and do some crazy new interface. And like we figured out during COVID how to work remote. People don't join the video calls much anymore. Anyways, they join and have their audio. So we're basically there today in many ways with remote hires. So our sense is that we're trying to just slot in exactly where people have the demand. And when we say we sell to Fortune 500 enterprises, we don't sell to tech companies. And I think folks that aren't in tech or that are in tech don't typically realize this, but there is a large portion of the US and the global economy that needs this technical talent but cannot get it. Right. So I think folks that I went to college with, a lot of them work at the John Deeres, the Targets, anywhere across Ohio, Indiana, Minnesota, and their ability to hire and retain technical talent is very hard. So for us to be able to support them is kind of our mission, and those are the types of profiles that we go after.
That makes a lot of sense. So going back to awareness, how aware are these companies and like public sector departments of AI agents, and like whether or not even like using ChatGPT was like a thing? Like from your experience, like what have you seen so far?
Yeah, they've all heard of ChatGPT by now. Microsoft CoPilot is also, we call it our marketing department, is Microsoft CoPilot. Microsoft comes in, they educate our buyer, it doesn't work, and then we come in and say, hey, that thing that you got pitched, here's the other working version. Be a bit facetious, but broadly, I would say they've heard about these things. What we struggle with is like convincing them that it shouldn't be a tool, it shouldn't be a platform, it shouldn't be a little automation in their back office technical team. It should just be another coworker. So I think humanizing it maybe helps. We're still figuring out like what makes the most sense. If you probably hear me saying the word her, she, that's like not by accident. It is by accident early days, but nowadays we kind of are trying to push this narrative. I think over time that will find its way into corporate America, but right now it is very much probably a shock when we get on a call and we're like, hey, he will be going in with us. But there'll be a first mover for some folks that are interested, and others will be a little bit late to the game.
How do you feel about the real-time API that just came out recently? Do you guys plan to like incorporate that, or is that like something that you've already built yourself at this point? What do you think?
Yeah, we type everything. So we had voice live in application 3-4 months ago. Not OpenAI, of course, they didn't release it. But we had versions through. I'll tell you a crazy pipeline we had. We had a 11 or a DeepGram transcription to Grok to OpenAI to an agent, a Anthropic agent, back to an OpenAI, back to Grok, back to DeepGram. That was like one full loop in one of our systems. A lot of that goes away over time, but we learned a ton about the interaction between how people want to converse with these systems. What does it look like to have long running tasks as well as like quick responses in the form of video, audio, platform when a user is logged in and doing stuff and talking? What does that interaction look like? What's the feedback? So we learn a lot in the early days just putting things in the market. We do have the real-time API in market as well for a few customers. And we're actually, the team's going to like a hackathon tomorrow to build out a bit more.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And how's the latency like? Because it sounds like a pretty huge pipeline of like chaining things together. And I know a lot of people go through like the same process of like, hey, like we want the response to be like accurate. We want like, some sort of like LLM as judge or like some sort of eval in the moment, but then the more things you add, the more latency potentially increase.
Yeah.
So like from your
Yeah.
experience.
So we broke that mold probably 6 months ago with event loops. So you can talk to the thing and it'll immediately respond, and it'll typically say like, I'm going to go do that for you. I'll get back to you when I'm done. Right. Like the same way you or I are on a call, we're not, doing all the work live, and over time, more and more of the work will be done live. But I think we were okay at a certain point to be like, great, it's now at a latency where we need to like kick that off into a background job. And when it finishes, it hits the event loop and then says, hey, I finished. Do you want the answer? And I think a lot of folks are noticing there's like tasks you want this thing to spend time on. There's tasks that like you want the real time response. The same way, hey, go and grab this information for me. You don't want it to go and just like do it one search, pull back the info. It might be like, that big presentation you have at your head fund that requires you to spend on a week on the topic. Go take your time. Like you don't have to respond immediately. And it's funny because I watched a couple talks like in the last couple of years around the Cicero model that Facebook put out and diplomacy, like a lot of these like early insights around search and planning and spending time. A lot of that's also moving into the LLM space. Like there's a lot of startups that I see popping up, which are converting into test time compute versus train time compute. And how do we spend more compute on the tokens or the agent instead of just on the train time?
So what I'm hearing is event driven. So it's also very like a human. It feels like a very human thing, right? It's like some of the things you want them to like spend more time on, and other things you can just kick off like a background job. Very like it's a very human way of thinking about like these agents. I absolutely love that. Do you want to answer a question from the community?
Do it.
Okay, so Winston has a question. How do you dynamically resolve those scenario where it should spend more time on versus less time on?
We don't. Our customers decide. We have a memory module. There, it sounds maybe fancier than it is. It's an asynchronous job that looks at the conversations and pulls out facts. Those facts get ragged in. Facts include, hey, when I responded in a quick manner, the user responded, spend more time on this. That would be a fact. Hey, the user, Brendon, wants me to spend more time on company research. Next time I ask about company research, ideally that gets ragged in. If it's a good embedding and a good retrieval system, and then it's going to spend more time. And spending more time is effectively having access to the metadata as well as the agent it's going to be running on. So we have tools and agents. Some tools are like a search tool, which will return immediately. Others are like a search and browse agent, which will actually traverse. So that's basically deciding what to do at runtime. And that decision is based on ragged in context, including memories. Great.
I want to hear your thoughts on multi-agent orchestrations. So is Athena one agent and then a bunch of tools, and then like each tool is like a heuristic plus LM chains, or is it like Athena has like multiple agents in like one network?
Yeah, we didn't think about this when we started, did we? We're facing that marketing question right now. I think is like, should we kind of split this thing off into Timmy, Tammy, Tommy, all the personas. I don't think we're going to do that in the near term. Technically, under the hood, we did have different agents that are connected to different knowledge bases with access to different tools and different permissioning models. We actually had a fun project for a short minute around if you have if you send an email today, you can add like plus some like string, and it'll still send it to your email address. We actually had a system where you could basically tag like an Athena agent in there, and then our system would process it differently. So you'd have like instantiations of yourself, Brendon plus marketing at AthenaIntelligence.ai. And if I work with that agent, it has marketing data, marketing systems, supply chain plus supply chain. So you're kind of like, it's you, but it's versions of you. One of the ways that we help ideate with customers in the early days is like, if you had 10 new hires that were interns, what would they work on? And then you can think of those as like 10 versions of your email address that are basically accessible to different personas of Athena.
Right. So it's almost like you help it make a decision on what to work on, what to focus on in the beginning, and then you squeeze more performance out of that.
Yeah, and it helps users too, right? Because like if I'm slacking someone on our engineering team, I have context of what their engineers work on, what they can do, what access they have. And if I slack someone on our sales team, I also know what their context is, what access they have. So from a user's perspective, you like the idea of being able to like reference a persona or an agent with certain capabilities. In describing them as like a human's name is typically like a nice way to help that kind of stick into our heads. So we're not saying agent 457, go run this. Agent 892, can you run this for me? Especially when you have different clients, right? So a client to us is like a web app is the first client we built. But nowadays you can email the agent and it kicks off like fully agentic tasks. So you need to be able, as you're like on the subway in the morning, to like Slack or email an address, but give it the constraints of the knowledge base, the tools in a way. And the easiest way to do that is to typically, call that like a person or an entity that has that action.
Incredible. Okay, biggest gains from using AI, or let's just take it up a notch, AI agents in these like large organizations that you've seen.
Search, like in what we've currently seen is just having the entire corpus searchable is like insane. Being able to retrieve information is typically the hardest problem because they're a lot of times siloed businesses. So just giving them the ability to kind of operate across their company. Over the years, they've acquired companies, they built systems in-house, external, having access to these like fully built out data silos is typically like the first win that we see. From there, I think the iteration speed of any problem, if it's ad hoc. So typically enterprise software has solved the like repeatability problems quite nicely. Some supply chain planning software greatly solves the Walmart supply chain planning problem. But the problem of tomorrow for Walmart, okay, how are they going to sell into this new market that they've never touched before? There's no software that exists. Going from 0 to 1 with tools like this, from writing the code to researching on the internet to searching internal documents, that kind of base layer is where we see a lot of value as well.
Makes sense. I can already imagine like somebody like maybe going to a different market and like moving from the company from like the US to Taiwan. They're sitting in like their hotel room, they're talking to Athena, and they're like, okay, so it's just giving me like the rundown, what we're gonna do, how are we gonna win this market? And it's gonna be like just them plus this like agent. And it's almost like a scene in the movie where it's like we're just gonna tag team it until we like get it started here in this new country or something like that.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of people have found the value of ChatGPT is like the brainstorming element too, of like, hey, I'm like walking into a new problem. How do I think about this? Can you outline some ways to, to dig in? Like, can you look at this? And folks have had this problem, for like over like the last 50 years in the digital copies exist, the PDFs, the Excels, the PowerPoints, the documents in Google Drive, SharePoint, OneDrive, Slack, Outlook. No one has the ability to do a control F over that entire system. And then once you control F, you kind of want to do something with it. You want to think, hey, across the entire enterprise control F, now what? Generate me a new Excel model, a new report that generalizes our thoughts around how we're going to sell into the Taiwan market for Walmart. One of our kind of like early customers was Anheuser-Busch. And the problem you just described is one of the problems we solve for them today, which is how do you understand from a legacy company that has years and years of experience and data across countries, and help them intelligently understand what new markets and new products could be delivered, and the reasons for them to be successful or not successful using internal and external data sources.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that go into that, right? Like when you go into a new country, new market, you have to understand like how the culture works, what's like the best practices for hiring and like contracts and like how to negotiate. Like everything is so like, and like anything would help, right? And I think that Athena, some of the AI agents comes in and like, this is just the bare minimum you need to know, so you don't like mess up like the most basic stuff. I mean, that could be huge gains already.
And the analyst profile to us is like the epitome of being able to just do good work. Because there's these like college new grads, educated, technical. They've never, done seltzer sales in Brazil for Anheuser-Busch, but like they're smart people. They can figure it out. We see the agent as Apina as this kind of catch-all for work within an enterprise, which by the time you're as big as a Walmart, there doesn't exist a off-the-shelf way to do their business. Like it's all bespoke. And historically, consulting services and professional services have supported them as they need to scale up. Nowadays, we have software that supports a bespoke company like this, and the workflow is something that they own. I think that's the other one that we're noticing is people love the idea of procuring Pina because they're building that that training and that workflow within the system, and they're not buying an off-the-shelf workflow that their 15 competitors are going to also be buying.
Do you see companies hiring multiple agents as the time goes on from now?
Yeah. Right now, our business model is converting, I would say, from users buying software to we are selling agents and like tying the exact contracting process around that. So effectively moving to a usage-based model. So I think of it as like, how do we treat the agent almost like an Uber for enterprise, where they're sign up, run this thing in Brazil to help with predicting seltzer sales for 6 months, and then let's turn it off and save some money and spin it up again in a new market next month. So we're migrating there. I'd say like the procurement model has to change from the organization, which takes tons of time. So we're just kind of tying into what they currently procure, which is typically users.
So I couldn't help but make a connection to, like IBM Watson back in the day, or like Salesforce Einstein. Like, I think they were making similar promises back in the day. They were like, hey, you can just hire this AI to work on your CRM. It knows everything. But I think when the promises that they made and the delivery execution was a little bit far off, especially for like Watson. A lot of people were really excited about it, and then they're just like, oh, it's just like a thing now. It's like a room full of computers. Like, we don't talk about that anymore. So I wonder if what's like the key difference here, like from your perspective, that makes this wave of like agent employees or like AI a little bit different for enterprises?
It works. I think that's the short. Like I hate to just say that, but like it works. Like I think the difference, and like the proof is in people are buying it and not churning and using it. Whereas I think like IBM Watson, you'd have to figure out a couple years later if it actually was working or not, because they're an established company. For us, we kind of enter a new market. We entered law by accident 3 months ago, and now it's deployed to pretty sizable law firm out here in New York. And no one on our team had any law experience. We didn't train it to do law specific things, but it's deployed at this law firm, and it's one of our larger accounts actually. So I think the proof is in like the fact that this thing can operate in a completely new field, whereas like we've never even thought about that field in a first class way without us changing the architecture of the system.
Cool. So quick question, fine tuning versus prompt engineering. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So many thoughts on this. Fine tuning reminds me of like Kubernetes. Like there's a segment of people that it makes a ton of sense for. You're probably not in that segment anytime soon. And I'm sure that I'll like rile up all the people that are in that segment and that can justify their use of fine tuning. But I've yet to see a startup with a fine tuning use case that month over month was like the right approach. Maybe for like a 3-month period during a model lull, it was the right decision. But then the next model comes out, and these base models are still kind of leapfrogging the fine tuning requirement. And then obviously like there's a cost benefit and there's like latency benefit. I think most people kind of like are maybe just a little bit they can get around those. I think like what we find today is like the base models are still strong enough, and you probably don't have a latency requirement, even if you think you do. Find some other way to show a UI interaction if it's going to take a little bit longer. But broadly speaking, there will be a fine-tuning use case in some future, but it's probably not going to be near term. My background is electrical engineering. I think like when I was in school, I had this like notion that FPGAs and ASICs were going to be prevalent. Like, why does this like generalized CPU and GPU run all of compute? Like, shouldn't there be specialized hardware for every single company? There's not. Grok maybe is like going to be the first, large scale cluster for sequential processing. But there is some rolling benefit of everyone being on the same stack, the same base model. We haven't seen it proliferate in the hardware space. You'd have to make a pretty good case for why it's going to do that in the software space, given the complexity of it.
Are you bullish on what Grok is doing?
I'm very bullish on what Grok's doing. We're huge fans. We've been in production with them for almost probably 8 or 9 months now. Yeah, huge fans.
And which models do you guys use off of Grok? If you don't want to answer, that's fine. It's like more like a deep dive.
We're an open book. We check our YouTube out. We post weekly updates on everything we do. We use 25 models. We probably use 2 or 3 of them from Grok directly. Those are obviously the open source models. Llama 2 7dB is like our go-to there. We've been using them for some voice workflows, as I described in the early days, for latency benefits, as well as all of our autocomplete. So we autocomplete in text input fields, LLMs, reports, sheets, notebooks. All of our interfaces have an intelligent autocomplete. Find the first token and like the ability to do that very quickly. It's kind of backed by Grok. Whereas if we're doing agentic work or long running work, that's going to be your Claudes and your GPT-4s.
Makes sense. Going back to your background, do you think the career that you had before starting Athena helped shape how you built Athena and helped shape like the vision for the company?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I was like lucky to kind of find my way into companies that work on hard problems. First of all, like being at SpaceX was like a great experience. Palantir, like similarly great experience. Scale AI, again, selling into industries that are non-traditional. So, not many folks have experience selling into manufacturing, industrials, cyber, governments, public, private, pharmaceuticals, healthcare. And then lastly, experience very, we call them like platform style companies. So Palantir is a great example of, it's a one company, but the 15 to 500 products, depending on where you cut it, under the hood that are kind of all operating together to provide value. An analyst to me is like a instantiation of that. A person who's able to do multiple tools, multiple workflows, and operate across tons of data, different types of data. So experiencing kind of like what it looks like to build, sell, and deploy software in that manner was very formative for us.
That's it. That's the webinar. Thank you so much for hopping on today. And yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's good fun. Cool.
Amazing. And one last thing. How do people find you? Are you on Twitter, YouTube?
LinkedIn. We're more of a LinkedIn shop, but we do have a Twitter. Athena Intel with 2 L's, I think. LinkedIn's Athena Intelligence AI. Twitter, Brendon Geils. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Cool.
Hope you have a good rest of your weekend, and I'll see you on LinkedIn.
Good to see you.